It was a war of firsts, the first major conflict after the Cold War, the first war televised live 24/7, the first large-scale test of stealth technology and smart bombs. But before Operation Desert Storm, there was Desert Shield, and before that, a blatant invasion that dared the world to respond. This is the story of the First Gulf War. Welcome to Old Around the World, where we travel back in time to bring historical events back to life. August 2nd, 1990. Under the cover of darkness, a formidable military machine rolls across an international border. Iraqi tanks, infantry, and aircraft storm into the small, oil-rich nation of Kuwait, annexing it in a matter of hours. The world watched, stunned. How did this brazen act of aggression lead to one of the largest international military coalitions ever assembled, and a war that would showcase a new era of technological warfare, all broadcast live into living rooms across the globe? This is the story of the First Gulf War, Operation Desert Shield and Desert Storm. From the invasion that shocked the world to the swift and decisive military campaign that liberated a nation, and the complex aftermath that continues to shape the Middle East today. It was a conflict that some believed heralded a new world order in the wake of the Cold War, a test of international resolve against a defiant dictator. To understand the invasion of Kuwait, we must first look at Iraq in 1990 and its ambitious, ruthless leader, Saddam Hussein. Iraq had just emerged from a brutal 8-year war with Iran, a conflict that left it victorious but heavily in debt, particularly to its wealthy Arab neighbors, Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. Saddam, envisioning himself as the preeminent Arab leader, saw Kuwait not just as a creditor, but as a historical part of Iraq, a former province of the Ottoman Empire whose independence he viewed as an artificial construct. By the summer of 1990, Saddam's grievances against Kuwait had reached a boiling point. He accused Kuwait of overproducing oil, driving down global prices and harming Iraq's struggling economy. He alleged that Kuwait was slant drilling into the massive Rumaila oil field, which straddled their shared border, effectively stealing Iraqi oil. And he demanded that Kuwait forgive billions of dollars in war debts. Diplomatic efforts to resolve these disputes faltered. Then, on August 2nd, 1990, Saddam Hussein made his move. Iraqi Republican Guard divisions, spearheaded by tanks, stormed across the border. Kuwait's small military was quickly overwhelmed. Kuwait City fell within hours. The Emir of Kuwait, Sheikh Jaber al-Ahmed al-Sabah, and his government fled to Saudi Arabia. A brutal Iraqi occupation began, marked by looting, repression, and atrocities. The international community reacted with swift condemnation. The United Nations Security Council passed Resolution 660 just hours after the invasion, condemning Iraq's actions and demanding an immediate and unconditional withdrawal. There were later debates about whether signals from some Western diplomats, including a controversial meeting between U.S. Ambassador April Glaspie and Saddam Hussein shortly before the invasion, had been misinterpreted by the Iraqi leader as a lack of firm American opposition to his territorial ambitions. Regardless, the line had been crossed. In Washington, President George H.W. Bush was resolute. Declaring this will not stand, he initiated Operation Desert Shield on August 7, 1990. The initial phase involved the rapid deployment of American forces, soon followed by Allied troops, to Saudi Arabia. The primary goals: to deter any further Iraqi aggression, particularly against Saudi Arabia's vital oil fields, and to begin building up a force capable of liberating Kuwait if diplomacy failed. What followed was an extraordinary display of international diplomacy, led by the United States, particularly Secretary of State James Baker, and with strong support from allies like the United Kingdom under Margaret Thatcher and later John Major. A broad and unprecedented coalition was forged. Over 30 nations, including key Arab states like Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Syria, joined forces with NATO allies and other countries from around the globe. This coalition was given crucial legitimacy by the United Nations. On November 29, 1990, the UN Security Council passed Resolution 678, authorizing member states to use all necessary means to eject Iraq from Kuwait if it did not withdraw by January 15, 1991. Simultaneously, comprehensive economic sanctions were imposed, isolating Iraq from the global economy. Throughout the latter half of 1990, Operation Desert Shield saw one of the most rapid and massive military buildups in modern history. Hundreds of thousands of coalition troops, thousands of tanks and armored vehicles, state-of-the-art aircraft, and powerful naval forces assembled in the Persian Gulf region. It was a logistical feat, projecting immense military power thousands of miles from home countries. The UN deadline of January 15, 1991, passed with Saddam Hussein defiant, his forces still entrenched in Kuwait. 2 days later, on January 17, Operation Desert Storm began. The world watched, much of it live on television, as a devastating air campaign was unleashed against Iraq and occupied Kuwait. Coalition aircraft, employing cutting-edge technology like stealth fighters, the F-117 Nighthawk, and precision-guided munitions or smart bombs, alongside Tomahawk cruise missiles launched from naval vessels, pounded Iraqi targets. The objectives were to dismantle Iraq's air defenses, disrupt its command and control, destroy military installations and Scud missile launchers, cripple its infrastructure, and critically, degrade the combat effectiveness of Saddam's elite Republican Guard divisions. Iraq retaliated primarily with Scud missile attacks, targeting cities in Saudi Arabia and, significantly, Israel. Saddam hoped to draw Israel into the conflict, believing this would fracture the Arab coalition aligned against him, while Israeli restraint and the deployment of U.S. Patriot missile defense batteries, whose actual effectiveness would later be debated, helped keep the coalition intact. The Scud attacks caused widespread fear. This was also the CNN War, the first major conflict to be televised live, 24/7, bringing the sights and sounds of distant battle directly into homes worldwide and profoundly shaping public perception. For over 5 weeks, the relentless air campaign systematically degraded Iraq's military capabilities. Then, on February 24, 1991, after Saddam Hussein once again rejected calls for withdrawal, the coalition launched its ground offensive. Under the command of U.S. General Norman Schwarzkopf, a massive, multi-pronged assault was unleashed. The centerpiece was the audacious left hook maneuver, a vast armored envelopment that swept deep into western Iraq, outflanking Iraqi forces in Kuwait and cutting off their retreat. The coalition forces, possessing overwhelming technological superiority, air supremacy, and better training, advanced with astonishing speed. While some Iraqi units fought fiercely, many others, demoralized and battered by the air war, quickly surrendered or collapsed. Kuwait City was liberated on February 27, its citizens celebrating wildly in the streets after months of brutal occupation. As Iraqi forces attempted to flee Kuwait, many became trapped on the main highways leading north. Coalition air power relentlessly attacked these retreating columns, leading to scenes of massive destruction on what became known as the Highway of Death. This episode raised questions about the proportionality of force, even as the coalition argued it was targeting legitimate military formations. After just 100 hours of ground combat, with Iraqi forces decisively routed and Kuwait liberated, President George H.W. Bush declared a ceasefire on February 28, 1991. The primary military objective had been achieved. However, a crucial decision was made. Coalition forces would not advance to Baghdad to overthrow Saddam Hussein. Their UN mandate was limited to the liberation of Kuwait, and there were concerns about the stability of Iraq and the wider region if Saddam's regime was toppled without a clear successor. The immediate aftermath of the war was grim. Retreating Iraqi forces had set fire to hundreds of Kuwaiti oil wells, creating an environmental catastrophe that took months to extinguish. While Kuwait was free, Saddam Hussein remained firmly in power in Iraq. Encouraged by perceived American support, Shia Muslims in southern Iraq and Kurds in the north rose up against Saddam's regime. However, without direct coalition intervention, these uprisings were brutally crushed by Saddam's loyal forces, leading to a massive humanitarian crisis. In response, the coalition established no-fly zones over northern and southern Iraq to offer some protection to the Kurdish and Shia populations. For the next decade, UN sanctions remained in place against Iraq, intended to pressure Saddam's regime and ensure disarmament, particularly of weapons of mass destruction. These sanctions, however, caused significant hardship for the Iraqi civilian population and became a subject of intense international debate. The continued U.S. military presence in Saudi Arabia, necessary to enforce the no-fly zones and contain Iraq, also became a significant grievance for extremist groups like Al-Qaeda, led by Osama bin Laden. Casualties varied starkly. Coalition losses were remarkably light, while Iraqi military and civilian casualties were devastatingly high. The First Gulf War was, by most military metrics, a swift and decisive victory for the international coalition. Kuwait was liberated, and Iraq's offensive military capabilities were severely crippled. It was a conflict that demonstrated overwhelming American military dominance in the nascent post-Cold War era, showcasing the power of advanced military technology from stealth aircraft to precision-guided weapons. It also highlighted the potential for broad international cooperation under the auspices of the United Nations, seemingly validating President Bush's vision of a new world order where aggression would be met with collective security. Yet, the legacy of Desert Storm is complex. The decision to leave Saddam Hussein in power had profound long-term consequences, setting the stage for continued tensions, a decade of sanctions, and ultimately, the 2003 Iraq War. The conflict reshaped regional power dynamics and underscored the enduring strategic importance of Middle Eastern oil. It left behind a host of unanswered questions about the nature of modern warfare, the responsibilities of victors, and the elusive quest for lasting peace and stability in a volatile region. The echoes of Desert Storm are still felt today. What's your biggest takeaway from the First Gulf War? Tell us in the comments. And if you appreciate this kind of historical content, show your support with a like and subscribe to Old Around the World for more historical events. By History Lover.